In Nigel Farage's mafia speech to the European Parliament yesterday, he also said something that bothers me. And at some point, he said something like, "Don't you lot realise that there's a bigger world out there?" Now, this is absurd because the EU itself is a global platform. Take, for example, science. The last science programme, FP7, involved 170 countries worldwide. Look at trade. The EU has got over 50 preferential trading partnerships right around the globe. Look at the EU standard, the CE standard. Even Japan and America have taken that on. So the EU has global clout and global networking. So why is it that this narrative of, oh, we in Britain are global and we can see the world for what it is, and you and Europe are sort of locked down and only regional? Where does that come from? I think it comes from when Nigel Farage's crowd were originally piping up and got accused of being Little Englanders. They just tried to find some way to flip the narrative and say, oh no, you're small-minded, more global-minded. And then they kicked in all this idea of empire just sitting there for us to rekindle. But we should bear in mind that a lot of the other European countries have also had colonial empires. Think of the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the Dutch. And if we look around the world, we can still see that clearly. In South America, it's predominantly Spanish-speaking, but Brazil is Portuguese-speaking. French Guiana is actually still part of France and part of the EU. Suriname in South America is Dutch-speaking. Now, if you think about Africa and the sea passage under Africa all the way to China, big chunk of North Africa is all French-speaking. There are Portuguese parts further down Africa. Cape Town was settled by the Dutch. Madagascar, that was French. Go on to India, that was British. Indochina, French. Across to Indonesia, that was held by the Dutch for about 300 years. And then if you look at China, there was, of course, Hong Kong and then the Portuguese port Macau. So all of these other countries have had global colonial empires too. So when we preach that we are connected with the rest of the world and imply that these other European countries aren't, we just make ourselves look like twats, and it looks like us who cannot get over it and move on to the future.